G'day, folks. I'm Jan Vermeulen. I'm the editor-at-large of My Broadband, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to today's event. We are going to be talking about cybercrime and its impact on business in South Africa. It has been kindly produced by the good folks at Storm Guidance and put together by the fine folks at Fire. I'm going to get your name wrong. I'm so sorry. I will get to that in a second. But we have a fantastic set of panelists lined up today, and it is going to give me great pleasure to introduce them to you. And we have a great conversation lined up with each of them to try and tackle some of the to tackle some of the important questions that South Africa faces in terms of cybercrime. So my panel today is Brigadier Piet Pieterse from Law Enforcement Cyber. He joined the South African Police Service and has been a detective since 1981. He worked at the Murder and Robbery Unit, Crime Intelligence South Africa, before joining the Commercial Crime Unit of the Police Service in 1992. And he is now at the Cyber Law Enforcement Division. We also have Mr. Tony Pillay, who's the director of the Law Society of South Africa. And we have Prof Snail who's a senior partner at Snail Attorneys at Law. He is also a member of the Information Regulator and will be here wearing that hat, speaking on behalf of the Information Regulator. We also have Neil Hare-Brown, the CEO of Storm Guidance, who is going to be talking a little bit from the perspective of cyber defense, preparation, mitigation, and response in the event of an incident, which is what this is all about, right? It's one thing to defend, but in the end, it's about how good your response is, because ultimately, as the saying goes, it's not if you're going to get hacked, it's when you're going to get hacked. I'm going to ask my panelists to each unmute themselves and get their video going, and so that we can get the show on the road. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me. And it's a pleasure to welcome you and to have you here. We have 125 people registered for this event. We've got a large contingent of people from professional societies in attendance, and it is my pleasure to welcome them and to introduce you to them. And I think let's kick off with some questions because we have a lot to get through and only an hour to do it in. Neil, we're going to start with you. With your global view of cybercrime, what do you expect the trends in cybercrime to be in the next 5 years?
Thanks very much, Jan. So I think with what we're seeing at the moment, it's clear that cybercrime will increase sort of further. And I think that ongoing increase is going to continue without major international collaboration. And that's kind of both the technical and legal aspects as well. And that's really because the crime itself won't be able to be effectively tackled because it is international in nature, because the internet knows no boundaries. Essentially, it means that cyber criminals can operate from all over the world and usually do operate in countries where it's very hard for their victims or the law enforcement who protects those victims, who serves those victims, to bring them to justice and to put a lid on the problem. There's also a technical challenge as well, because a lot of the crimes that occur, especially with crimes such as ransomware, rely on vulnerabilities, shall we say, or weaknesses in information technology. And certainly there seems at the moment to be a lot to do for the main providers of those technologies, the Microsofts, the Apples, the Googles, etc., to raise the bar to be able to effectively protect us against those types of attack. In terms of the types of crime, so at the moment we're seeing in our incident response a big rise in extortion, and extortion being used as a lever. So for instance, with ransomware attacks, the traditional approach to ransomware was to drop some malware onto a victim's systems, which would then encrypt them. It still is very much the case. But what the attackers were finding was that only a percentage of those that they had attacked would contact them and be willing to pay the ransom. And that's because they had their data backups to be able to recover their systems from. And so they didn't want to pay the ransom, especially not to pay criminals. But the problem that has now evolved with this particular crime is that the criminals will steal data before dropping the ransomware and encrypting the network. And so, and then they will use that data, the fact that they have that data, as a lever to extort the victims and to say, we're going to release this data to the press, to the public, in fact, actually, even now, we've noticed recently that they're threatening to release the data to law firms who might then want to take action on behalf of those who've been affected. So that's a real issue at the moment. Also, we're seeing criminals now moving to more anonymous cryptocurrencies. They were using Bitcoin and still do to a certain extent use Bitcoin, but now more anonymous cryptocurrencies such as Monero are becoming much more widely used, and they're much harder to trace. So again, it kind of makes it even harder for law enforcement to catch up with these criminals. And also there is a big expansion and a big rearrangement of the way in which cyber criminal groups work. And so where previously you might have just one single cyber criminal group of people that would be attacking their victims, now it's actually built into a whole hierarchy of different organizations, some that will actually do the hacking, some that will provide all the tools to enable them to do that and to enable them to drop ransomware or malware, others that will do the ransom negotiation. So there's a whole massive group of different criminals involved, and that's driven by what we now kind of know as cybercrime as a service. And these criminal business models are kind of growing out, and that also drives, certainly for South African businesses, more of a risk, because as if you like, the business of cybercrime grows even more, it means that there are many more people in the cybercrime area, and they're all competing with each other. And so they're going to be looking for new victims, new levels of victims, where, for instance, the main focus would have been in the West on developed countries. Now it's very much moving to developing countries. And so the low-hanging fruit in those countries are now becoming the new set of victims.
Yes, and that's a fantastic overview, Neil. Thank you very much. Yeah, it does look like the field has expanded, or sound like the field has expanded a lot, and that there's just a lot for businesses to keep track of. It's almost impossible, and so yeah, I think this. For that reason, this conversation today is so incredibly important. Folks, everybody who is joining us now, you are early, don't worry, you've not missed the bulk of it, so welcome. And this is going to be an interactive session. We've got a lot of questions that we're going to be posing to our panel, but you're also welcome to pose your questions in the chat bar, in the messaging bar, and we'll go through them and pose them to the panelists at the end. We'll be holding the questions, and then at the end of the session, we'll leave some time for Q&A, but get those questions in now so that, we can immediately start digging into viewer questions when the time for our main panel Q&A is over. Brigadier, I'd like to come to you, with regards to what Neil has the picture that Neil has painted for us now. What is the greatest challenge that law enforcement faces in prosecuting cyber criminals?
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, let me start by saying that the police budget speech is being delivered in Parliament this afternoon. It would be interesting if there's something about cyber. So let's hold thumbs. So the question about law enforcement challenges in terms of cyber. If you ask me that question, I would immediately want to highlight the operationalization of the envisaged Cybercrimes Bill and Cybercrimes Act, and respond in terms of referring to the internal human resource capacity building a skills development training program, establishment of a designated point of contact, the reporting mechanisms, the creation of that cybercrime center. I think we're looking at the policing model, the reporting obligations in terms of 54. I think it's quite important. I'm sure you will highlight it a bit later in your in this session. And of course, the creation of a task team, multidisciplinary approach, awareness, etc. However, Jan, I think that if you allow me, I think we should just take a step back, and Neil actually started by referring to international cooperation. And that's where I would want to start. Now cybercrime has evolved into a distinctive and a sophisticated crime phenomenon, which requires the highly skilled and specialized law enforcement response. And law enforcement agencies and prosecutorial authorities face a number of key challenges in successfully addressing the scourge of cybercrime. I think that's it's not just in South Africa, but all over. So cyber criminals are normally protected by the anonymity that technology offers. It's normally a faceless challenge, a faceless crime, as one of its unique characteristics. Now, the objective should be to identify the criminal behind his or her computer, gather court-directed evidence, admissible evidence, by the way, done in the correct fashion, draft a proper indictment, a charge sheet, and normal run-of-the-mill policing is also important. It's not just high-tech. So the question really is, having these challenges, but what works? What works is intelligence and a prosecution-led, directed, driven approach. And I would think that SAPS and law enforcement on its own will not be able to succeed in order to address cybercrime. Now, stakeholder partnership with law enforcement, extremely important, and I think that this is where the business fraternity can come in and assist the South African Police Service. So on a transnational, the transnational nature of cybercrime, we looked at the challenges first of all, and I would actually say that a national legal framework is one of the challenges that we are facing. Cybercrime laws vary between countries throughout the world, and I think it's important to take note of that. Effective communication between the police and prosecutor teams from different countries will normally result in the successful prosecution of cyber criminals. And in South Africa, within our scenario, we have a number of examples of that being the case. If we work together with prosecutorial authorities and law enforcement agencies throughout the world, that normally result in a successful prosecution. So yes, I think that we should we need a reliable and effective mechanism, a policing model, and I would like to elaborate on that a bit later. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier. Prof Snail, I'm going to immediately come to you, though there is a lot to discuss in what the Brigadier has just raised. Let's just get some background on what's happening in South Africa. Has the Information Regulator seen an increase in data theft in South Africa in the past 12 months? What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, I think data theft and security breaches in the last 12 months, especially considering the fact that we are in the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a ripple effect from that, to say that with the increase of devices, with the increase of traffic on the net, comes an increase of cyber criminals, comes an increase of negligence from employees or people in organizations, how they share their data. People are more loosely using their data. People are very keen to load apps on their phones without looking at the terms and conditions as to what exactly these apps are collecting from you. I mean, I'll make you a classical example. If you 10 years ago wanted directions to go somewhere, you would phone the person. He would say, look, when you get off the N4 highway, you'll see the McDonald's on the right, and then you'll turn left or whatever. Now, in 2021, you simply send a location. But this location that you have sent, are you aware of the fact that you're actually sharing personal information? That geographical location that you've given is personal information. Now, as to who may intercept that communication or who may use that information for wrongful purposes is something that we can never, ever know. As you correctly said, it's not about have you been hacked, it's when you'll be hacked. I mean, myself, I'm a cyber lawyer, and 5 years into Snail Attorneys, one day I walk into my office and there was a cat on my website. You know, so even us get attacked. I mean, even the FBI in America get attacked. So I think cybersecurity is something that affects us all. We need to do education right from the grassroots level. Your 5-year-old, 6-year-old child who's using TikTok or playing Minecraft, as I've just discovered with my kids, they should be monitored. One should know as a parent what the kids are actually doing on the cell phones. And the same goes for high schools and tertiary and employers, you know. Do not wait for data protection or for cybersecurity to become an issue. Spend a couple of rands, bring in an expert, design some policies, get people to understand what this is about. And I think it's a behavioral change, you know. 20 years ago, when the ECT Act came, we said, oh, lovely. Electronic transactions, oh, lovely. Cybercrime provisions. And as Brigadier Piet Pieterse correctly pointed out, that ECT Act is ancient now, right? Cyber criminals in the last 20 years have changed their ways, have changed their modus operandi. So, like I said, it's very, very important to do a mindset shift. I think I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Professor. Yes. And I think that today's session is definitely going to be about a mindset shift, especially amongst the business and professional communities in South Africa, about what we can do, you know, that we're not all that we're not helpless victims here at the southern tip of the continent. There's a lot that we can do, even though we are outgunned by a lot of these cyber criminals. I'm going to come to Mr. Tony Pillay. Tony, what is your view on how members of the Law Society are being impacted by cybercrime? That's something that you have insight of, and I think it'll be valuable for folks watching what you're seeing in your professional sphere.
Thanks very much, Jan. I think in the legal profession, we've had cyber attacks as far back as 2016. And the bulk of the cyber attacks on law firms have been business email compromise. Now, as all industries are aware that we as a legal profession are actually in business, and the influence of the attacks and the veracity of attacks doesn't exclude law firms. In fact, we have always been under the impression that we were easy targets, and there's a number of reasons for that. But one of the two biggest reasons, one is lack of capacity and resources, and the second one is lack of ongoing and continuous education. But the attack can be described simply in terms of the professional indemnity insurance that we offered prior to 2016. From 2016, the profession has excluded cyber attacks from the professional indemnity insurance cover, and practitioners have to buy that separately. And so there's been a ripple, not a ripple, there's been a compounding impact on legal practices in South Africa.
And sorry to interrupt you, the reason that happened is because of the massive rise in attacks, correct?
Yes, yes, and the quantum of the insurance claims that the Legal Practitioners Insurance Indemnity Fund had to pay out. It still continues today. And the unfortunate thing is that in terms of our law and in terms of our civil regulations is that the unsuspecting members of the public are actually end up losing money if they've put money into the wrong account. And the judgments have said that the individual is responsible to ensure that the account in which they're paying that money into has been verified. So the onus is on the members of the public, you know. And in some instances, it's actually ransomware that has attacked the law firms. One of our local law firms had to pay $1 million in terms of ransomware to get their data back. Now, many of these claims are not reported because you can understand the reputational damage to the institutions and the firms. So in the legal profession, what has been reported and rejected in claims in the last 4 years is over 100 million. What we do is we provide information. We don't provide guidance to our members because that is, as Sizwe said earlier on, it's a very complicated a risk that you have to deal with, and there's many levels of that risk. And if you provide guidance on a tertiary or basic level, it doesn't protect the industry. So as far as the legal profession is concerned, this is a serious problem. It also impacts on the reputation of the profession as a whole, and that's what it is.
Yes, and
Thanks,
thank you. So I wanted to perhaps give folks a practical view of what an attack like this looks like. This isn't something that is out of left field, or like ordinary people can get caught up in this. And Tony, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the attacks I've seen and reported about are, for example, where someone is buying a house and then either the buyer or the attorney's email gets compromised in some way, and the attackers then send an email to one or the other party saying, that trying to intercept the money flow from one of the parties. So if they get into the attorney's email, the hackers would then send an email as the attorney saying, my bank account details have changed, or please pay your deposit into this bank account. And the unsuspecting buyer just does as they're instructed, and thinking that they've paid the deposit on their house, comes back to check 2 months later how far the process is. And then the lawyer says, but no, we never received your deposit. So the whole process is stalled. Those are some of the cases I've heard. Tony, is that an accurate example of what you've seen?
I think that is the real example that's impacting seriously. We call that business email compromise, so that the emails have been compromised. And in those instances, the individuals, even their electronic banking conditions doesn't allow them to claim from their banking institution. And all of us, when we sign electronic banking, doesn't matter whether you're an individual or firm, you basically give up lots of your rights in terms of electronic banking, and you accept personal responsibility and liability to use the banking platform.
Yes, the banks are often late to this party, but I am seeing the banks at least rolling out features now to allow you to pay. You do have to pay for the service to verify a bank account before you make the payment. So that's at least a step in the right direction. But yes, a lot of people have lost a lot of money this way, which is why we're having this conversation today, to help protect members of the public and to help professionals like lawyers avoid situations like this and protect themselves and their clients against situations like this. On that topic, Prof Snail Kamtuze, I wanted to ask you about what Mr. Pillay has just described regarding a lot of the cases going underreported. What does that mean in the age of POPIA? When can a business choose not to report a cyber incident, and when must they disclose it to the Information Regulator, and how are they going to be held accountable for data breaches on their systems?
Right. I always say Section 22 of the POPIA is not a quantitative inquiry, it's a qualitative inquiry. In other words, we're not inquiring as to whether there were breaches of 10 people or 5 people or 100 people. The fact that there was a breach, that is the issue here. So if there was a breach, be it a digital breach, be it even a bricks and mortar paper-based breach. I mean, one of the first breaches that was reported to us as the regulator was an insurance company. They were moving applications for insurance policies from one office in Rustenburg to Johannesburg. And I think the robbers got the wrong tip off, because they then went and hijacked that truck. Well, that's what we thought, you know, to say that, wait a minute, they hijacked the wrong truck. And then in hindsight, we said, but wait a minute, they stole 14,000 applications of insurance policies, all those IDs, all those bank accounts. So eventually we spoke to that insurance. I mean, unfortunately, I can't tell you who it was, but you know, these incidences are rising by the numbers. Some people have taken the stance to say, yeah, POPIA is only becoming law on the 1st of July. We're not going to report this. Our reputation is more important to us. I can assure you, we have been receiving breach complaints in the numbers. You know, the register has been increasing. And I must say, especially from the private sector has been very receptive to this. You know, they even contact us, they explain what their breaches are, and we've been guiding them in terms of that. And I think there's a bit of a fallacy that's out there that says every breach is the result of a cybercrime. That's not true. A breach can be the result of the fact that Sizwe and his secretary are exchanging passwords, something that you shouldn't be doing. Or the fact that Jan is giving the guy who's driving his car, he's giving him the passwords to the access gate. That is where the problems happen. And that's why I say, you know, it's not always the technical issues, it's the organizational issues. And once organizations accept that now there is a positive duty in terms of POPIA to protect and secure personal information of third parties, I think that is what needs to happen. And people need to understand that self-reporting is the law. It's not a favor, it's not an option, it's the law. The only instance when Section 22 says that you don't have to report immediately, by emphasis, within a reasonable time, that is when there is a cybercrime incident, or there is ransomware, or there is some form of extortion happening, and the law enforcement would like to deal with this issue first. There, the POPIA says you can delay notifications to the data subjects and to the regulator, but when you do notify the regulator, you will have to explain why you delayed.
Brilliant. Thank you, Prof. I think it's important for people to realize that, and it's excellent to see how South Africa's privacy regime in that sense has changed, because this is something that hackers have been calling for the longest time. And part of the reason you get hackers that, you know, after they've discovered a security vulnerability, they give a company a deadline and say, you know, by then or else I go public without you, is because there's been this underreporting. And so it's great to see that it's made the law. Folks, I want to just once again remind everybody who's just joining, we are only about halfway, so you are early. Welcome. Please post your questions in either the Q&A box or in the chat. We will be monitoring both. This is going to be an interactive session. So after we've had the back and forth with the panelists, we'll be opening it up to the Q&A from the floor, and we'll be taking your questions. So please get them in so long, and then we'll also have an idea of how much time we need to leave to get to each of your questions. Brigadier, I saw that you had your hand raised. You wanted to jump in. I'd like to give you that opportunity.
Thank you, Jan. You know, we dealt with the business email compromise, and we know that crime evolves, and I think it's important to perhaps just spend a few minutes on business email compromises and the criminal value chain. We see the trend that the bank account particulars are changed, and we sort of know the run-of-the-mill criminal value chain, but the new trend is to change it into international bank account numbers. I deal with quite a number of complaints on a weekly basis, and I can tell you throughout the world, you can mention the country, you can Singapore, Australia, Hong Kong, UK, all over the world. So that money leaves South Africa. So following the money, that's the problem. Now, that is why it's so important to have a response protocol and the intervention strategy. The sooner it gets reported, and we are in collaboration with the Financial Intelligence Center, we can stop that money in the account. And I think it's important that businesses out there and victims of business against or business email compromise victims should therefore report those matters as soon as possible to the authorities so that we can stop that money in the account. We are, if it's early days, we are in a position to stop the money and at least secure and get the money back for the victim. That's just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier. Yes, very important. Neil, yes, absolutely. Please jump in.
I think it's a very good point that Brigadier makes. I mean, we've investigated hundreds of BEC incidents in the last few years, and you tend to see that, as Tony was saying, you tend to see that these attacks are occurring particularly in particular sectors where they can be successful in their frauds. So obviously, the legal sector is very well targeted. One that we've actually worked on many incidents is in private schools. And for some time, we were wondering why it was that private schools were having their email boxes compromised. And the aim really there is to defraud the parents of their annual fees. Wow. And it's because, and what we learned from that also applies to many other fields as well. And I'll come back to the international aspect, but what we learned was that it's where there is a natural time delay, a normal time delay in a legitimate transaction. So if you are sending your children to a private school, then at the end of a particular term or a semester, the school might send you an invoice for your next year's or your next semester's fees. And then you might take a week or two to make that payment. And then there's usually a school holiday and everyone in the school goes on holiday for a few weeks. And then maybe early in the next term, the school's admin might process your transaction, or they might recognize that you have paid your invoice. And so it's this natural delay that allows the attackers to commit their fraud, to deceive the parents into making payments to a different bank. We've here in Mauritius, we've had a few cases where the attackers are getting them to make an international payment, for instance, into South African banks, because the victims are South African parents here in Mauritius, expats, and so there is this time delay which enables the fraudsters to get away with it before it's realised. In the UK now, the banks have implemented what's called confirmation of payee. So for local transactions, there's an automatic lookup. For many years, we've been very frustrated with banking because for many years, since the year dot really, the account number and the sort code are the only two pieces of information used to validate a transaction, and the account name was never used. So that means that you could be operating, so a fraudster could create a money order or a fake invoice and have the business's legitimate name on it, so it looks like it's a valid invoice, but a completely different account number, and the bank will make the payment on the basis of the account number only. That has changed now in the UK for local transactions, and so as a Brigadier was saying, this now means that there's much more of a focus on international payments, and so those organisations, those businesses in the sectors where and the type of business that you're in, if it means that you're going to be more likely to be making international transactions, the attackers will be doing their reconnaissance. They'll be figuring out which organizations are likely to be doing that, international shipping, law firms again, anyone who's likely to be buying or purchasing internationally. They will be targeting those types of organization, attempting to phish them, to break into their mailboxes so that when they commit the fraud, it's not likely to be recognized because it's just a change in an international money order. or invoice. So yeah, that's the main problem there.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. And Mr. Pillay, I'd like to come back to you. How well prepared are your members to deal with cyber attack currently?
Thanks, Jan. I think it's a difficult thing for all businesses to be adequately prepared. But as I indicated earlier, the law profession members have limited capacity, and in terms of compliance, there's a number of other compliance issues that they have to deal with. So the short answer is I personally do not think they are well prepared for cyber. I think one of the biggest problems they don't do education and training, and they don't have experts reviewing their systems and also the management of data breaches, which is a very specialized and sophisticated thing, manage data breaches and restoration. And I think most industries in South Africa, compared to the rest of the developed world, are still far behind the curve. So that's the short answer is no. I think there's lots of work that still needs to be done. But as a law practice, they would have to reallocate resources from one area to another. And obviously it depends on how they do their risk management and how they prioritize the various risks that they face. And
Yes.
so in each practice, it would be different.
Yeah, yeah. And as you say, it's not just going to be the law profession that faces this. Any professional, company, any company of professionals that deal with a lot of money, that either transit a lot of money or take in a lot of money, work on big contracts, are potentially targets here. And so it's fantastic that we're able to learn from your experience and your members. But yeah, everybody watching should definitely take note that any professional that handles any significant sum of money at any point can become a target. It just so happens that the cyber criminals have fixated on lawyers in some respect.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt. I think Sizwe raised it previously. The legal profession deals with lots of personal data, sometimes very sensitive data. So when there's cyber attacks, it's not only for ransomware or to fraud, business fraud. In many instances, it's to get the contact details, sensitive details, and then perpetuate different sort of cyber crimes against the individuals or clients of the law firm. So, that is why I think Neil also touched on that. There's a specific reason why the legal profession has been targeted. So it's not only directed at the firm itself, but it's also directed at stealing data, sensitive data. And in many instances, it's also corporate data, which then escalates it into a much more sophisticated crime.
Yes. Prof Snail, I'm going to come back to you because I think what a lot of people want to know is what are the penalties for non-compliance and the result of being a victim of a cyber attack in South Africa?
Okay, so once again, I'm going to have to make the distinction between data protection and cyber criminality. On the data protection side, if there is a breach or there is a non-compliance with the 8 conditions, as we call them, the 8 POPIA conditions, you can bring a complaint to the regulator, and this complaint will be fully investigated, and if found to be non-compliant or having breached the POPIA, there are fines up to 10 million rand, and in particular instances, it could also be other criminal effects. In other words, it's not just data protection, but on the criminal side, you could be guilty of Section 86.1, the hacking provision, or 86.2, the stealing data unauthorizedly, or manipulating data, or destroying data, or the likes, or even the classic denial of service attack, 86.15. So there's really a lot of laws dealing with this, but I think the issue that we need to grapple with at the moment is capacity. Capacity and awareness and education is the most important thing. I mean, even myself, we've been now at the regulator for 4 years. Even after so many years of working with POPIA, I still find a section here or there that causes me to have to go and page into the act and really go and read properly. So, you know, I think what is important for businesses is, on the one side, protect your data in terms of data protection laws. And if you are affected, report your incidents. And if there are criminal elements to it, go and report it to the South African Police Services. There is a cybercrime unit, and you know they do effectively deal with these complaints. They do even have prosecutions of these complaints. The fact that there are not numbers published everywhere saying, yeah, these are the numbers that we have, it doesn't mean that cyber criminals are not prosecuted in South Africa. They are prosecuted, but I think on a capacity scale, you heard a Brigadier was lamenting earlier on, I think our government really has a duty to put in more money into training more people with skills within the police services, so that if you go to a police station and you bring a complaint, a criminal complaint, you don't have to first struggle to actually get to the cybercrime unit. So I think that is one of the issues that really needs to be dealt with. And from a regulatory point of view, I think once again, it's awareness of the data protection principles, awareness in the organization, and taking the necessary technical steps and analyzing risk. I think risk is the mother of security breaches. You know, if you can deal with risk, then you won't have the child called security breach. So I think risk is one of the things that we need to focus on. And I think our focus has moved too much from risk prevention to what to do to prosecute. I think risk prevention is a very important part, and this underscores data protection as well.
Thank you, Prof. Brigadier, I'd like to come back to you because we have a number of really good questions, but perhaps a place to start with regards to what the professor has just raised is, what are the police able and not able to do to help in the event of a cyber attack?
Jan, thank you. The fact of the matter is that we need to take note of the criminal value chain. And I would like to refer you to the Cybercrimes Bill and certainly the number of offences and the category of offences. In terms of the ECT Act, we only have 3 vaguely defined offences, and we will be confronted with about 13 categories of offences, and the last count is about 46 offences, quite specific. And the reason I'm mentioning this is because I think it could actually assist law enforcement in addressing the cybercrime phenomenon, specific categories of offences. Because what we need is a different investigative methodology approach in terms of a specific category of offences. And I think it's important to just take note of that. What the police are doing is to have a unique policing model in terms of cybercrime. That is quite unique given the specific circumstances in our country. We have done a lot of research in terms of different policing models throughout the world. And I think that we could expect the Cybercrimes Bill to be enacted quite soon. And that policing model should then form part of our implementation on the short, medium, and long term. The focus is really on capacity building. The focus is on getting our police officers trained. And I think one of the most important things is the reporting mechanisms. My personal opinion is that gone are the days where you have to go to a police station, go to a service center or a charge office to report a matter. It just doesn't work in terms of cybercrime. We've referred to bank accounts, money being transferred unlawfully into bank accounts. By the time it gets to the investigating officer, that money is gone. So we're certainly looking at a online reporting mechanism, a rapid response protocol, a stakeholder partnership where people within industry that has the necessary expertise assist law enforcement in addressing the criminal value chain.
Mm. Brigadier, thank you so much. And I'd like to I'd like to open up now to some of the questions from the floor and bring it back to some practical matters that people have been asking about. And Tony, I just wanted to let you know that I see that you're ready to answer that question. I definitely want to get to that question. Before we talk about ransoms, though, I wanted to talk about the practicality of what you do in the event of a cyber attack. And Brigadier, let's start with you regarding what's the first step? How do you report it? Who do you report it to? Do you open a case with the police? We've got a question from Renier, who says that in his personal experience, he tried to open a case like this at the SA Police, but he didn't have much success. So what's the advice for folks there who have been the victims of a cyber attack?
Jan, the first thing is to ensure that the evidence material is secure. I find a lot of matters being reported to us. By the time it gets to law enforcement, you try to find the evidential material on the instrument. You would normally find that the technician responsible for the company's cybersecurity has removed the evidence. So I think that is quite important, is to don't destroy evidence. In terms of reporting, I think you would find that there would be reporting protocols, online protocols, where people get firstly advice. The creation of the National Cybercrime Center will actually take us a bit further or forward in terms of addressing cybercrime and getting involved in the investigation much sooner than it would be when you report a matter to a police station, for instance. So reporting, I think the online reporting mechanism, I think that would assist us in getting to the investigation quicker, secure money in accounts, and the sooner we get involved in the investigation, the better. So that's the first step. The second step, of course, is to get cooperation, full cooperation from the victim. We know that people are reluctant to report. But I must also just point out that in terms of the Cybercrimes Bill, Clause 54, there's an obligation on communication service providers and on financial institutions to report. So they are obliged to report as well. But I think it's better to get cooperation willingly from victims of cybercrime, and I foresee that we would move into that space quite soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier. Regarding the online reporting, is there a website people can go to right now to report cybercrime, or is that still in the works?
Well, Professor Snail will know that we've been talking about getting the reporting mechanism going. And we actually started with an email address, providing an email address, which is a step in the right direction. In the cybercrime strategy for the police, which needs to be signed off, and it will be signed off soon, and in the implementation plan, there is provision made for online reporting. It might be that you still have to go to the police station, but you can report it so long online, and you could get almost immediate response from a police officer, well trained, within an environment where he can assist you in terms of the first information of crime.
Okay. Thank you, Brigadier. Neil, I'd like to throw this question to you as well, because after the reporting, or perhaps tell us a little bit, does Storm Guidance help with the steps of reporting these crimes, and then what do you do to recover from a cyber attack? Because that's the next step after reporting it.
Well, certainly in terms of preservation of evidence, what the Brigadier pointed out there is so key. And with a lot of these incidents that are suffered by businesses, they have a real problem because they need to prioritize the recovery, and sometimes they'll prioritize that recovery over the maintenance of evidence. And mostly that is because the people that they're using to do that work are generally IT people that don't appreciate the need to preserve evidence. I think when it comes to actually what does a good incident response service look like, and certainly that's something which we've been doing for many years now, and are developing on with our cybercare service in South Africa, is for businesses to appreciate what they can expect from law enforcement. Law enforcement, just like any crime, have a limited responsibility. They are there to investigate the crime, but they're not really there to, as you've already pointed out, to help the organization recover. And also, law enforcement all over the world, just as in South Africa, are focusing their budget on targeting cyber criminals high up the chain. They want to spend the public money where they can make the biggest difference. And so they're trying to take down the big cyber criminal groups. And that means that they have to focus in those particular areas. And sometimes it means that they have only limited capability to help individual organizations, just like any other crime, not only cybercrime. Also, we find that IT providers are generally quite unskilled, and they're not experienced in helping organizations to respond effectively. And that potentially leaves businesses more exposed to loss, and generally unnecessary loss. That's certainly been our experience over the years. There's, I would say, a limited number of professional services firms able to assist as we do in this particular area. And certainly for many SMMEs, that means that they don't have much available to them. They're challenged in terms of the resources and the offer of support, and often that can be extremely high cost as well. So that's one of the reasons why we've come up with our cybercare model. In terms of what you have to do to be really practical in responding to an incident, well, certainly to have a 24/7/365 hotline, to make sure that you've got smooth processes for onboarding and to manage the incident calls, and to have a rapid risk assessment of the client's business operations and their IT environment, to make sure that you've got good incident coordination and that the relevant people in the organization are involved and they are properly advised so that they can make informed decisions, to make sure that you've got the digital investigations expertise, to make sure that you preserve the evidence and you've got a chance to analyze it, to find out how you can contain and how you can eradicate any particular problems on an organization's systems. And then you're in a position to be able to recover effectively and make sure that, for instance, you don't reinfect the system, for instance, if it's with ransomware. To also have a good understanding of the legal environment and the applicable laws. Obviously, it's key that qualified lawyers are involved when it comes to the direct advice, but certainly for an incident response team to have an appreciation of what the aspects of the laws are. That means when you notify to law enforcement, when you notify to the regulators, and if you have to notify to affected data subjects as well, and how you go about doing that in the most effective and timely way. And then obviously the recovery, making sure that you're working with IT providers to build back systems in a really effective manner, and to make sure that they're then resecured so that the organization is no longer exposed in the same way as they were at the outset of the incident. And that's finally what I would say is very important, a post-incident briefing to make sure that the management of the organization, the executives and the technical folk all understand what actually happened and how they can avoid these situations going forward.
Thank you, Neil. I'd like to circle back to this if we've got time at the end, because there are folks who want that email address that you talked about, Brigadier. But there's another important question I definitely want to make sure that we get to, which is what is the panel's view of payment of ransoms, especially where an early resolution is critical for business continuity? Tony, you said you wanted to kick it off here, so please take it away, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the panel, because I think everybody will have a unique perspective on this question.
Sorry, Neil. Jan, I was just looking at the questions, but the conservative and the standard response is do not pay. But I find that in the reality, that's not working. And we provide information to the profession. And one of the areas we look at every day is the FBI's cyber notice board. And when you open the notice board, the first thing says, do not pay any ransomware. But at Colonial Oil gas line yesterday, day before yesterday, they paid $4.5 million because of the impact of the delays. And every business would have to analyze in terms of its risk analysis, what would be the impact, and then make a decision that squarely fits into the business objectives of that institution. And I think that's the real position, although it goes contrary to general advice. But I think Neil also touched that repeatedly in his discussions earlier on.
Yeah. Prof Snail, what's your view from the information regulator's perspective about paying ransoms when a system gets locked down by ransomware?
I don't think from the regulator's perspective, we can ever promote payment of ransomware in the instance where personal information has been stolen. I don't think that would be the right message to send out. However, from a practical perspective, and I'm going to speak as a lawyer now, if a client comes into me and tells me that, look, it's either we pay this money or they destroy our information, you know, ethically, I will obviously tell my client that, hey, man, paying ransomware is just not good. It's not the right thing to do. But a client may leave my office and weigh their options and pay the money in any event. So, you know, whether we support it, whether we are against it, I think we need to educate our people that when you are a victim of this, do not pay.
Brigadier, from a law enforcement perspective and even from a legal perspective, are you allowed to pay ransoms? What's your advice there?
Well, the advice from our side is to never pay, and you know, we don't encourage paying, but I think it's also important that when we do get approached, we understand that the victim is in a very difficult position, and I certainly can't enforce that there shouldn't be any payment on the ransom, but I wouldn't advise him to pay. But I have noticed that if you provide a effective response and assisting and become actively involved with the business and you're working together, that normally you would find that that person the victim would delay the payment if he was considering that. And that, in my opinion, is good enough in those circumstances. But certainly advise not to pay, because they could request more payments. You know, that's also the downside to it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brigadier. Neil, it's always interesting when your principles collide with reality, but from your perspective, you know, what do you see in practice when people pay ransoms? You know, do the hackers make good, or, you know, do you end up in a situation where you pay and your data gets destroyed anyway?
All of the above, basically, Jan. We've had cases where the client has paid and they have not received the decryptors. We've had just a whole range. One thing we certainly find with our own ransomware negotiators, we've got a great team for ransomware negotiation, and we certainly, I would agree with the whole panel that we certainly do everything we possibly can, and we've built up a lot of different techniques over the years to avoid the need to pay the ransom. to find different ways to recover data. We've got certain decryption capabilities as well on occasion that have worked. But certainly there are lots and lots of different options that are available. But even if you have no intention to pay the ransom, sometimes it's still worthwhile engaging with the attackers. And we certainly do that. The reason why is because, as I think the Brigadier has already mentioned, in doing so, you can delay things. So if you need to introduce delay in order to put together a notification strategy, if you need to let lots of different people know, if you need to introduce a delay to make sure that you can recover systems and you don't want them to be re-attacked, etc., then that is one of the reasons why you might engage with the attackers to just basically just put in loads and loads of delays and keep putting them off. The other important thing is, as I mentioned earlier, data is often stolen by the attackers as part of the attack. And so it's worthwhile, it can often give you a bit of a heads up as to which systems they attacked, if you can ask them for what we call proof of life of the data. And so we always look for that so that it can then give us a bit of a heads up as to what data is actually in the possession of the attackers. And then that can also inform the victim's senior management as to the risks and further inform them. But certainly we assist in that the whole way through. If in the end of the day it is still necessary to pay the ransom, then we've got a whole range and set of methods available to clients to do that securely and anonymously.
Mm. Thanks, Neil. Folks, I know we're running a little bit over time. If you'll bear with me for another 2 minutes, there is one more important question that I'd like to get to from the audience, but that doesn't mean that the other questions are not going to be unanswered. The team at Storm Guidance has committed to providing follow-up afterwards, and so your questions will be answered in follow-up. But for now, a quick one that I wanted to get around was the email address to report cybercrime to. Brigadier, do you have that email address, or Prof Sizwe?
Jan, what I'll do is I'll provide, because I actually want to provide more than the email address, and perhaps look at the reporting port as well.
Okay.
So that would be something I could provide to all participants, and then we could get feedback from those people directly to law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Brigadier. Prof, I see you've posted it in chat. Everybody can grab it in there and copy it out for those who are watching or listening. It is inforeg, INFOREG, @justice.org.za. Thank you very much to my panelists. This was a fantastic session, very informative. And I think everybody has learned a lot from your expertise today. Gentlemen, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. I do hope we get to speak again, because there's a lot of stuff we didn't get to cover today, and a lot of stuff still coming with the Information Act coming into full effect in a month and a half. Yeah, there's exciting things happening with the cyber crimes will coming down the pike. Then, folks, I just wanted to say thank you very much for joining us. I want to encourage you that if you are looking for a solution, a system, a provider to help you look at your cyber incident response, please give Storm Guidance a call. I'm going to share a slide with their contact details on it now on screen. So I'm going to obscure our faces for a moment so that you have that information. You can email Nicola P at stormguidance.com, and there's the phone number 082-965-7362. Please contact them for information about what you can do for your cyber response strategy. Those are the good folks who have put this whole event together, put this amazing panel together with Firecracker, the event organizer, who did an amazing job. Thank you to everybody. It was a phenomenal afternoon, and I wish you all the best. Even though we started off with the admission that or the acceptance that make provision for the day when you get hacked. It's a fairly negative way to approach the problem, but it's realistic. And it's not the end of the world when it happens. The reputational damage, speaking as a media professional, is not nearly as bad as you think, because it happens to everybody. And there's some great advice to be had out there from the folks who participated on this panel and from the good people at Storm Guidance. So give them a call. Thank you very much. And I hope to see you all again soon.